Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to Parkitect. Today we're finishing off Coral Caldera. I had to double check myself there to make sure I actually pronounced that right because I think last episode I might have pronounced it wrong. But in case I did, Coral Caldera is the name of the map, and we are finishing it off today. I have to say though, I was not anticipating this to take as long as it did. There's still a couple things I would love to do with this park that you'll see at the end when I do a quick little overview that they're just not done yet. And it's unfortunate that kind of stuff didn't get done, but this episode was already the most time sink of an episode that we've had so far. And it probably could have been 3 parts. I didn't want to stretch it out to 3 parts. We'll leave with 2 for now, and maybe we'll come back to it later. But alas, that is where we are at. But getting back to where we are in the video, we are building our first mouse car coaster. I'm not sure the exact terminology. Let's go with a mouse trap coaster. It's like the game that you played as a kid. I'm not actually sure if they produce that anymore. I'm not sure if it's like vaulted. I don't even know if it was like Hasbro that made it, but it's probably actually mouse car coaster. And wow, I hate this ride with a passion. I think I did a fairly decent job at building it. The structure of it turned out, right, not this exact frame that we're looking at here, but the finished product turned out pretty well. I think it fits like the actual layouts or like a typical layout of a mouse car coaster. I think that there should be more airtime hills. Mine's definitely lacks in that department. I was really striving to try to get a high intensity rating, and I could never get above like 56, which I think is medium intensity, because guests in your park in this game just love high intensity stuff. And maybe that's just because I don't know, most of the flat rides are, I would say, medium intensity, and so you need coasters to balance it out with a high intensity. But I got screwed over with my coaster selection. Like, I had a junior coaster and a wild mouse ride coaster as my 2 starting ones. And then I got even more screwed over with the ones that I got from research. Coming into this, I actually thought that the coasters that were researched were all set in stone. Like, based on the scenario, you'd get, the B&M flying coaster second, and maybe a steel coaster, and then a powered coaster like third and fourth. But that's not actually how it is. In between episodes, between episode 1 and 2, I kind of watched Silverette's playthrough of this map, and I was really kind of looking forward to seeing if I could get a B&M inverted coaster in here, because it's not one that we've built yet, and it's probably one of my favorite coaster types behind the NMN Blitz. I guess I would like to say that I liked RMC's coasters too, but I haven't had a chance to ride one yet, mainly because of my nerves. So for now, I'd say that probably the NMN Blitz and then B&M Inverted would be 2 of my favorite coaster types. So I would love to get that one in eventually, but instead we had to settle for the mouse ride. The nice thing is, it is a lot cheaper, because as I found out later on in this episode, and I won't spoil it quite yet, not real roller coasters, they're all real roller coasters, but more your standard format steel coasters are expensive to build. I thought that parts were pretty cheap in this game, especially because I'm not entirely sure what the one-to-one currency is. Like, right, you start off with like in the tens of thousands of dollars of currency. I'm not sure if it's in dollars. I think it is, at least for me. Maybe it changes depending on what you designate your currency to be. But I think mine's in dollars, or I don't know. Maybe it is like a different. I can't really tell from that symbol. But anyways, I'm not sure what the one-to-one like exchange ratio is. So I don't know if like the scenery is like really really cheap in this game in comparison to the rides. Especially the steel coasters, because that ate up a ton of budget. Although I've kind of talked down the mouse ride quite a bit, the one thing it does have going for it is the fact that it's a very compact coaster. I was able to fit in such a small space, and to be able to have a ride that's like that cheap and fit in a small space and still provide like decent stats, even though it didn't hit high intensity. And again, I think that it probably could become a high intensity ride if I added more airtime hills and I was a little bit smarter with my layout. But other than that, I think that overall, it's a pretty solid ride for what you get out of it. It's just not the most exciting thing to build, and it's probably not the most exciting thing to watch. Every once in a while, I think it would probably be okay to watch build it or build it. So I'll keep that in mind. If it's something that like I absolutely have to build for stats, I think I will. But I'll probably hold off on doing it again for a while because I just can't think of many parks in real life that have one anymore. I'm sure that if you leave me a comment, you could tell me exactly where I'm wrong with that statement and that there's, plenty of parks that have one. But I know that I've ridden a couple, but I can't even think of them off the top of my head of which parks they're even at. Um, I guess that's where I should have done my homework and looked it up. But it's been a pretty busy day and a pretty busy week, so I haven't had time for that. And which is, by the way, something I forgot to say, because I think this video will be released on the 14th, which is Valentine's Day. So for all the couples out there, happy Valentine's Day. And for the people that are single, happy Singles Awareness Day. Definitely a holiday for everybody, even if all you do is go about your daily routine, because that's about, what I did. Making videos and enjoying life. So happy Valentine's Day, happy Singles Awareness Day. And if I could do one thing for my Valentine's Day, it'd be to visit this park, right? Yeah, well, maybe not. Especially because now that we're building the coaster station for the mouse train, I'm not even sure. We'll call it mouse ride. That this ride broke down a lot. I know I was just kind of boggling between praising the ride and, saying it was awful, but I must be terrible at building it, or the game must hate me. And I'm going to lean towards the latter, that the game hates me, because about at the end of year 2, rain started pouring down nonstop. Tons of thunderstorms, which I think it cut out of this time lapse purely because, and I've mentioned this in the previous episode, rain is terrible, and it slows your FPS, and it ruins everything. But not only does it ruin everything in terms of like recording and like gameplay wise, or recording and like visual wise, gameplay wise it hurts too, because it seems like as soon as it rained, this coaster would not work. I know that like towards the end I have some block breaks, because I was trying to like be able to add more cars to the ride, and on the last, or maybe second to last set of block breaks on the turn, it actually goes uphill afterwards. And so if the ride shut down because of rain, which happened fairly quickly, the cart that was over top of the hill, or the cart that was about to go over top of the hill on the block breaks, would stop because it stops on the block breaks for rain. And the car behind it, when the ride was reopened back up and the carts were allowed to go again, since the lead cart couldn't make it up over that hill since it was just stopped from the rain, the car behind it would slam into it and it would crash off the track, and then the whole ride would have to close again. Now, that being said, this was my highest profit ride in the park. I know my junior coaster was doing pretty well, and some of my flat rides did decent, but this was my highest, gross, income for the park. And for it to also, I got distracted looking at the screen for a second. I accidentally had hit the aerial key and I couldn't figure out how to flip back into normal mode, which now I know M flips between aerial view and just your normal 2D isometric. But going back to my story, after it broke, I think 5 or 6 times, no one rode it. So it just basically sat empty the rest of the gameplay, which kind of sucked because I went from having like $2,500, almost $3,000 a month in like profit that I could use to expand and build things, to this ride being unoperational, maybe 1 or 2 people riding it every month, which is terrible statistics. And if that was a real park, this thing would be torn down instantly. And maybe that's why there's no more mine rides that I can think of anymore, because all of them break down in the rain. No, I don't think that's actually it. But yeah, this thing sat empty, made me no money. It costs a lot of money to upkeep. I mean, it's not really that much money. Like I said, it's a really cheap coaster, so it's not too terribly bad. But I went from $3,000 a month in profit to about 300, and then eventually I actually had to pause the game and go back to a previous save because the park wanted to foreclose, and I didn't think that if I took out a loan, well, I should have just actually looked and saw the requirements. 'Cause I'm pretty sure you could have had a loan in this park, but I didn't want to start down that track of getting it out a loan and then being negative in revenue, having to owe a loan, and I was really, really close to having the park foreclosed. So I had to save and exit and reboot from an earlier stage. And thankfully, I was able to complete the scenario. Although, since my happiness rating dipped during all this, so you have the rain comes in, turns down the rides so that people can't ride the rides, and the guests in this game are very finicky. They know exactly what they want, and they will not be happy if they don't have what they want, which I guess is like real life. But I digress. The guests are not happy they don't get what they want, so they don't have their rides because of the rain, or because they broke down like the coaster because of the rain. Then they go around breaking things. So they turn to vandals. And I think in like episode 1 or 2, I talked about what vandals are. And if you've played the game before, you know what they are. But if guests don't have their needs meet, they get a backwards hat, and sunglasses and a mask, which, actually that was probably, a precursor to COVID-19 because now they're, being good and wearing their mask. But, yeah, they wear their little ski mask or bandana rather than ski mask, but they wear a bandana, sunglasses, backwards hat, and they run around breaking everything in your park. So you have a nice park bench, you have a nice trash can, you have a nice lamp that's there. Well, that's all broken. You have a nice fence, so I actually don't think they can break fences, but my point aside is they break things, and they litter, and they're generally not happy campers. And then that has a compounding effect, because guests really enjoy their immersion ratings. So when they see trash, when they see things not broke or things broken and not working, they get mad. And then what do in turn? They become vandals. And so while I'm over here trying to like build up different parts of the park and trying to figure out why the rides that I'm getting aren't the ones that I thought I'd be getting, well, the guests are tearing apart the park. And so I did not catch it soon enough. And I think when I paused it, after I had rebooted in the game from like my save, there was almost 20 vandals in my park. I didn't even realize that was possible for there to be so many. And so I had to kick all of them out, and my population was already suffering. I think at like peak point at like last video, or I guess the last video where it ended, we hadn't opened the park yet. But I think the peak point before everything started turning for the worse was we were at almost 450 guests or something, which is not bad. Especially when like our goal was to sell 800 total tickets. So 450 guests is really not that bad. But we went down all the way to like 220 or 250 guests. So we lost half and almost more than half of our guests in the park. Then the other problem I found was, since we were losing guests, we had rides crashing, people were complaining about the happiness and stuff, and then we had random events start coming up. And maybe the random events start at year 2, I'm not entirely sure. But the random events start having all of so they have different events. Like some of them are like, all right, there's a global shortage of this ketchup, let's say. So we're going to increase the price of ketchup in the park, which is silly, but it's fun. And then there's other ones like, oh, ride restraints or ride parts are now in shortage, so ride safety will suffer. So now people don't want to come to parks. Or like they'll say that a nearby amusement park had an accident at their park, and now people don't want to come to yours. So that all compounds together, right? And it made this park take so incredibly long. I think if it wasn't for all those different setbacks, we probably could finish the last couple things that I wanted to do in the park. But there's just so many things that went wrong at the very end stages that I could not keep up. But alas, since we've already built a bunch since I last talked, I really like what I'm building right this second. I think in the future I'm going to try to find some better designs, and if you couldn't guess already, since there's not too much there, I was trying to build some sort of like game or like a carnival game. That's what it is. Like in many sections of parks, they'll have different games. They'll have like the one you climb up the ladder, right? The rope ladder, trying to get to the top, which I think is possible actually. There's like a YouTube channel that goes around in different parks and shows you how to beat the different carnival games. But this one was supposed to be more like one of the ones that you throw like the ping pong balls into like the little um, mason jars with water, and then you can take a fish home. I'm not sure if they do live fish anymore. That's maybe more of like a state fair kind of thing than an amusement park. But yeah, I wanted to make some buildings like this. I only ended up doing one purely because the like rounded pieces are fully set on the tile grid, and you can't make them any smaller than that. You can't like set them up in between the grid, so it has to be directly on the grid. And that means that the buildings are rather large. If anybody knows of any designs for like little carnival games or things like that, I'd love to add them into my park going forward because I think they're pretty fun and I think it adds something to the scenery. It's also kind of awkward because with like curved walls, you can't put a path underneath them because people will go through the walls. So you kind of have to like color the ground to make it look like the path's there, and it doesn't quite work right. But I mean, it's good enough, you know. It looks all right. Now, I had to add a carousel in. I know that I was complaining earlier about, you know, not being enough rides that were intense enough for my guests, and so adding a carousel probably wasn't the greatest idea in hindsight. I probably should have just saved the money from the carousel. I mean, granted, it's only 400, so it's probably one of the cheaper flat rides when most of them run between, I think, like 1200 and like 1600, so it's only a fourth or a third of the cost of like a more expensive flat ride. But I really like what I did with like the multi-layering of like the essentially mesh or like net roofs. It probably would have looked a little bit better if I didn't have like the borders on it to make it more look like it was like a mesh material rather than like an actual roof. But it gave me a really good idea if we actually have a beach. Like this is an island, right? And I was kind of disappointed at first because I really wanted there to be a beach scene because that's what, you know, some of my favorite parks are. They're along the water. But I think that not Banshee, Gatekeeper, thank you. Gatekeeper at Cedar Point, it runs right along the entranceway, right? And then it runs along the edge of the beach. And it's very beach color themed and open air kind of style cues. And even just, there's like a huge pavilion right in front of it. And almost like the entirety of the pavilion has those almost like the triangle kind of curved on one side and pointed on the other, like mesh netting for to block the sun. And I think the Q path has some of it as well. Although I would need to go take a look and double check because I think some of the Q path runs underneath Banshee's station as well. But it definitely gives me some of that like beach summertime vibe. So maybe I can make that work a little bit better. And now we are going back to the main street. The one thing I said in the last video about these buildings was that nothing matched up, or at least nothing really felt like it was too cohesive. And I mean, I guess that's okay because most main streets have, or not even just main streets, but park in general have different architecture styles, and that's okay. I would have liked to have a more cohesive one for this, but I'm starting to struggle with finding different ways to use the pieces, right? So my first problem was I had no idea how to use the pieces at all. And then my second problem was, or this was when I'm saying problems, I'm meaning like throughout my growth of Parkitect, right? We're on episode 5 or 6 now. 6, I think. I'll have to be, someone will have to tell me down there what episode this is, or I'll just have to go look again. That's terrible. But throughout like my growth of Parkitect, I've started to understand how to use certain pieces, right? Make different designs with the pillars, make different designs with the different wall types, and add things together. And I am like slowly learning new things. Like in this building here, I try to make it more of like a Spanish villa style building, and I really learned how to like integrate the different wall and arch pieces into like windows. So I think that was pretty cool, and I'll definitely use that going forward. Especially if there's some more like European style builds. But a lot of the way that I build buildings is kind of generic with like the way that the parts are, and it feels kind of overused. So I might just need to go watch some videos and see how to do better at using the parts that I have available to me. Like, what are some different styles? And maybe that's just, going and seeing what other people do on the maps. I'm hesitant to do that before I build because then I feel like I'm taking from their inspiration rather than making my own. But I guess that's what happens in real life too, that you will take inspiration for the things around you, even if it is like similar to what you're doing. I think it's a pretty common thing. I think another thing that might help me with my creativity here is that the next couple maps I think are really forcing you into a theme that is different than what we've been doing so far. So my hope is that when we go to those themes, it'll really push me out of my comfort zone and we'll get some new style buildings and something that won't be so dull to watch. And maybe it hasn't been like too terribly dull, but when I'm watching it back, although I do like what I'm building, even if it may not fit altogether, I do enjoy what I'm building. I'm just hoping that it's not like too over duplicated. And with some of the themes, I think the next one might be like desert, but not Western, but like more Arabian or like Middle Eastern inspired architecture. And then the one after that, I believe, is space theme. Don't quote me on that, but space are like futuristic. So those different themes will give us a break from like the general like typical theme park mentality. And then hopefully when we come back from that, we'll have some new ideas of how to use the different pieces and parts. And, it won't be so boring to build your generic main streets and things. So that's kind of something that's exciting and something to look forward to. So if you're looking forward to those, make sure to stick around into those videos. Which reminds me that I did have a new idea for some content. I'm not sure if it would slot into the normal Parkitect Sundays or if it would go into Wednesdays. I still would like to keep Wednesdays more oriented towards variety and then keeping like the building and Parkitect stuff on Sundays. But I saw that Parkitect had build challenges. Now, if there's anything that can push you to be a better builder, it's build challenges, especially when they're very concentrated into different themes and ideas like theirs are. I think this month it was like, I don't know if it was gentle rides. I think it was more like medium intensity rides. And the whole goal is to build like the coolest scenery around the ride to really immerse it. So I think that that's something that would be really cool to do, and it would definitely help like get ideas of different building techniques, and it'd be something that I could test those different techniques and styles without feeling like I was constrained to like the style of the park. So if you do like the idea of doing that, it would definitely be a smaller episode. I would hope it would be under 10 minutes, or in like the 10 to 15 minute range. And you would like to see it, let me know. Also, let me know if you'd like to see it like in place of like Parkitects for normal Sundays, or if you'd like me to try to like slot that into the Wednesday variety days. I'm cool with either one of those options. I definitely think it'd be fun, and I will try to do it as soon as the February build challenge comes up. I feel like the January one's been open for like 2 months. It's like February 14th right now, Valentine's Day, and it's still on the January build challenge. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong. Maybe the January build challenge results are what it's showing me on the mainstream, and then like the join challenge is actually the February's challenge, and I've just been missing out all this time. So maybe I'll take a closer look into that after this episode, and that could be something that we do, because I think that would be really cool. And like I said, it would be a way to challenge myself and something that I don't have to worry about the constraints of the park. And now, as we are finishing up the last little bit of the Main Street buildings, and I think actually that vine that you see there, I put in the middle of the road, so I had to go back and fix that later. Fun little oopsies. And then we can move to what I believe is the last ride that I have on camera. I ended up doing a fair amount of work off camera just because, like I said, the park ended up taking such a long time, and I really did not want this video to go too long. I think that after the last video, I had this one sitting at like 22 minutes, and I really did not want this one to go over 30, so a lot of the things that I did after building the steel coaster, which you're seeing now on the screen, I kind of trimmed down, but I will show you what the park looks like in its final state. So stick tuned just a few more minutes and you will be able to see that. But yeah, I had no idea what exactly to do to get the last couple guests in the park, so I wanted to go with the biggest coaster type that I could. As I kind of mentioned earlier, I got really screwed over with like the coaster types that they gave me. I started out with a junior coaster and a mouse car coaster, and then I got the Gerlocker one, which is exactly almost eerily similar to the mouse coaster, and I want to say something else like a spinning coaster. Yeah, it was an inverted spinning coaster, and I have no idea how to design those, so I should look it up. But there was no way I was going to build one of those first on screen. So finally, after even more research and more money spent, I was able to unlock the steel coaster. And so, although the layout for this one is kind of whack, and it's not my favorite one, I think it's okay. And it actually did struggle for a while because I had that really, really sharp turn off the lift hill because I was at the edge of the park, and that's kind of neck breaking, and I don't think that anybody in real life would ride on it for purely that reason alone, even if like the layout was more normal. But yeah, so even though the layout's not like incredibly normal, I think I got some decent elements in. I wanted to keep it very like low to the ground, like my other junior coaster was, and very terrain conforming, and I think I accomplished that pretty well. I really liked how I had two elements over top of the water. Having the double loops right there were the kind of like the iconic piece that I really wanted to like shoot for, and that was the whole reason why I put the steel coaster on the hill to begin with. That's actually at the very, very end of the main street, and so if you were able to look in first person perspective, I think that you'd be able to see that yes, indeed, the double loops at the very end of the water, so that you can see all the way from the back of the park, or from like the entrance of the park. I'm not entirely sure if that's true, purely because the loops aren't very tall, and most like centerpieces at the end of Main Street, so you want to be a little bit taller so you can actually see them. But I think that like the perspective holds true. Um, at least I hope so. And then, so we come out of the double loops. It slows down a little bit as it builds up over the hill. I wish that I had some more interesting elements at the end of this, but I did kind of finish up with a double helix, and then the helix turns into a brake run here once I was finally able to figure out how to get the second helix over top of the first one without going too high, because the one really interesting thing is that the height matching is incredibly difficult to do when you're going up or down, like on a very like gentle slope in Parkitect. So, and since there's no like true autocomplete feature, yeah. But alas, we made it. As you can see, I'm gonna do a quick little overview here, and there's a lot of things that have changed. From the beginning of the episode, we already had the couple buildings in the first part of the main street. I wish we'd have finished out the right side, but I really like this little small area by the little lake and like the chair swing, the little pavilion, the bumper cars, which was a hit of a ride, and our junior coaster that has a lot of water and terrain elements. We move over here towards the newer part of the park. They have a couple flat rides, which you do not get to see on screen. We have our Enterprise and some other kind of just like, meh pathways. But I had some good foliage and stuff, and our mouse car, which, it sucked, but oh well. And then lastly, I actually made the path go underneath the loops. I wanted it to go over, but it's a little bit too high, and I didn't get to build a station. So if you did stick around to the very end, I want to give you a quick thank you. Make sure that you leave a like, subscribe, throw a comment down, and tell me how you like my idea about doing the monthly challenges. And I will see you all next week. Take care, everybody. Later.